What if the person who hurt you the most was someone who genuinely believed they were doing everything right? What if the damage wasn't done in anger or neglect or cruelty, but in love? That's the question at the heart of one of the most quietly revolutionary books ever written about childhood, identity, and the hidden cost of being exceptional. Alice Miller's The Drama of the Gifted Child is not a long book. It's not a complicated book, but it is the kind of book that can stop you mid-sentence and make you sit in silence for a long time. Because it names something most of us have never had words for, something we've carried so long it just feels like us. Let's get into it. Alice Miller was a Swiss psychoanalyst who spent decades working with patients who, on the surface, had everything going for them. They were successful, they were intelligent, they were well-behaved as kids. They were the ones parents pointed to with pride. Teachers loved them. They were responsible, sensitive, perceptive, often more emotionally mature than the adults around them. And yet, they came to her office deeply depressed, or empty, or disconnected from themselves in ways they couldn't explain. They had built beautiful lives that somehow felt hollow, and they had no idea why. Miller started noticing a pattern. These weren't people who had been abused in obvious ways. There were no dramatic horror stories. What there was instead was something far more subtle. These were people who had learned very early in life that their worth depended on how well they could meet other people's needs, especially their parents' needs. And that, Miller says, is the real drama. Not cruelty, not neglect, but the slow, invisible reshaping of a child's identity to fit someone else's emotional requirements. Here's how it works. Every child comes into the world with a full range of emotions: joy, anger, sadness, fear, desire, confusion. That's just being human. But some children are raised in environments where certain emotions are not acceptable, where a parent gets uncomfortable when the child is angry, where sadness is treated as weakness, where having your own needs is somehow seen as a burden. The child picks up on this fast. Children always do. They are extraordinarily perceptive. And so they adapt. They learn to suppress the emotions that cause problems. They learn to be what their parents need them to be: calm when mom is overwhelmed, cheerful when dad is stressed, responsible when no one else will be. They become, in a very real sense, whatever keeps the peace. And here's the thing that makes this so complicated. These children are often praised for exactly this behavior. They're called mature. They're called gifted. They're told they're so grown up, so thoughtful, so easy to be around. And they absorb that. They build their entire sense of self around the idea of being that person. But underneath all of it, the real child, the one with the full range of feelings, the messy emotions, the unmet needs, that child gets buried. And buried children don't just disappear. They go underground, and they cause problems later. Miller is careful here. She's not saying parents are villains. That's actually one of the most important points in the whole book. Most of the parents she describes were themselves wounded children. They weren't consciously trying to harm anyone. They were operating out of their own unresolved pain. A mother who can't tolerate her child's anger might have grown up in a household where anger was terrifying. A father who needs his child to be perfect might be running from his own sense of inadequacy. We pass things down without meaning to. That's the tragedy. But understanding where it came from doesn't make the wound any less real, and Miller is very clear about that too. So what happens to these gifted, adaptive children when they grow up? A few things, and you might recognize some of them. One common pattern is depression, not the kind that has an obvious cause, but a kind of low-grade emptiness, A feeling that even when things are going well, something is missing, that life feels like it's happening at a slight distance, like you're watching yourself go through the motions, performing the role of a person who is fine, but not quite feeling it from the inside. Another pattern is what Miller calls narcissism, and she uses that word carefully because she's not talking about arrogance or selfishness in the way we usually mean it. She's talking about a deep dependency on external validation, a constant need to be seen, admired, appreciated, because that need was never truly met in childhood. These are people who seem incredibly confident on the outside, but are actually terrified of being truly known, because somewhere deep down, they believe that if people saw the real them, the messy, needy, imperfect real them, the love would disappear. So they keep performing, they keep achieving, they keep being exactly who other people need them to be, and they get very good at it, often remarkably successful. But success, Miller says, is not the same as healing. There's another thing she talks about that I find particularly powerful. It's the idea of the false self and the true self. The false self is the adapted version, the one that was built for survival, the one that knows how to be charming at parties and competent at work and supportive to everyone around them. It's not fake in the sense of being dishonest. It's real, it just isn't complete. It's missing the parts of you that never got to develop. The true self is what's underneath. It's the part that has real desires, real anger, real grief, real joy. Not the performed version of those things, but the actual felt experience of them. And for a lot of people, connecting with the true self feels terrifying, because the true self has been in hiding for so long that even letting it breathe feels dangerous. Miller says that healing begins with something that sounds simple but is actually incredibly hard. It begins with being allowed to grieve, specifically to grieve what didn't happen, to grieve the childhood where you should have been allowed to just be a kid, where your emotions should have been welcomed, not managed, where your needs should have been met, not reversed, where someone should have been there for you, really there, not the other way around. A lot of us resist that grief because grieving it means accepting that it really happened. It means acknowledging that something was lost, and it can feel disloyal, especially if our parents were not cruel, if they were trying their best, if they loved us in the ways they knew how. It can feel wrong to mourn a childhood that wasn't obviously terrible. But Miller is insistent. The grief is necessary. You cannot build a life on a foundation of denied pain. You can build an impressive-looking structure, but it won't feel like home. Now, this book was first published in the 1970s, and it's been through several revisions. Miller actually removed some of her earlier psychoanalytic frameworks over the years because she came to believe they were part of the problem. Traditional therapy, she argued, often recreates the dynamic of childhood. The patient learns to perform health. They learn to say the right things, to please the therapist, to demonstrate progress, but the underlying pain stays untouched. What she came to believe is that what people actually need is what she calls an enlightened witness, someone who believes you, someone who doesn't explain away your pain or reframe it into something more palatable, someone who simply says, yes, that happened, and it wasn't okay, and your feelings about it make complete sense. That witness can be a therapist, it can be a friend, it can sometimes be a book. Miller received thousands of letters from readers saying that reading her work was the first time they ever felt truly seen. There's a reason this book has never gone out of print. So what does this mean for you, practically, in your real American life, right now? Well, start with a question. When you were growing up, were you allowed to be angry? Not just angry in acceptable, controlled ways, but actually messily, inconveniently angry. Were you allowed to be sad without someone trying to fix it immediately? Were you allowed to have needs without feeling like a burden? Were you allowed to just be ordinary sometimes without performing or achieving or making someone proud? If the answer to any of those is no, or mostly no, it's worth sitting with that. Not to blame anyone, not to build a case against your parents or your past, but to understand yourself more honestly. Because the patterns we built in childhood don't retire when we hit adulthood. They keep running. They show up in our relationships, in the way we handle conflict, in the way we respond to criticism, in whether we can actually rest without feeling guilty about it. Miller's book invites you to look at those patterns with compassion, to understand that you didn't choose them, you built them because you had to. They helped you survive, but they were never meant to be permanent. The gifted child in her title is gifted partly because of intelligence or sensitivity, but mostly because of a specific and exhausting kind of adaptability. The gift, in some ways, is also the wound. And here's what she leaves you with. The goal is not to go back. You can't undo your childhood. You cannot reparent yourself into someone who had different experiences. But you can stop living as though the danger is still present. You can slowly, carefully, with a lot of patience, start to let the buried self come back up for air. You can start to notice when you're performing versus when you're actually present. You can start to feel your feelings instead of managing them. You can, as Miller puts it, reclaim the vitality, creativity, and emotional capacity that was always yours, that just needed permission to exist. This is not a quick fix book. There's no 5-step plan here, no morning routine that solves everything. What there is something rarer, a deep, honest, compassionate look at one of the quietest and most widespread sources of human pain. The experience of growing up before you were ready, of learning to take care of everyone else before you ever learn to take care of yourself. If any part of this has resonated with you, that resonance is worth paying attention to. Not everything that's uncomfortable is a sign you're broken. Sometimes it's a sign you're finally looking at something that's been there for a long time. And that, Alice Miller would tell you, is exactly where healing begins.